So I've worked at a tackle shop for quite a few years now, and one thing I've noticed is that consumers tend to be the most frugal when it comes to buying fishing line. If you want to spend an extra $20, $30 and get a nicer rod, easy, no problem. You want to spend an extra $20, $30 and get a better reel? No problem, I'll do it. But the second it comes to spending an extra $5 on fishing line, people don't want to do it. So what do you think is the biggest factor in a longer cast? High quality line? Better reel? Longer rod? Well, in today's video, let's find out. So the current hypothesis that we are going to test is that the quality difference in fishing line is more important to casting farther than the quality difference in rods and reels. I also believe that the quality of line and diameter / type of line is also a huge proponent of how accurate your casts are and how far you can make a cast. So in our experiment, I have 4 different tests to compare against each other. Firstly, I have my control group. This is, in my opinion, some of the best gear you can get to cast lures a long ways. This also happens to be my own personal setup that I use on a trip-by-trip basis. That setup is the Okuma Guide Select Pro 7.6 Ultralight with a Shimano Stradic CI4 1000 and my current new favorite line, the Berkeley Forward 6-pound braid. Now, the next 3 setups after all have one thing changed. One has a change in reel, one has a change in rod, and the last one has a change in line. I'm going to be taking 25 casts, each with the same small 1/4 ounce float. We're going to kind of use it as a little casting plug, and I'm going to be recording the distance each time the lure lands to figure out our average casting distance. Now, some other rules to consider here is I am going to take 3 practice casts before each one starts being tested, just to help even out that line and give each one a fair shot. The other thing is the bait or the little casting plug is going to be 1 foot away from the last rod tip each cast, because obviously however much line you have out could potentially change the distance of your casts, and that's not the gear's fault. So we're trying to keep this as controlled as possible here. Another thing to help kind of keep this as controlled as I can is going to be there's no leader lines. So if it's braided line, it's just straight braid. There's going to be no fluorocarbon bumper on it, nothing like that. No knots, no type of different knots on these. And then as well as if there's any gusts of wind in between, that is either going to not be recorded or I'm going to wait until those gusts are gone. I know some of my casting competition videos that I filmed a long time ago they got some heat because people didn't say the tests were fair. So I'm trying this time to make this as fair as possible, and I've done a lot of things much more controlled in this one than on the other ones. The rod is also going to be casted the same way with the same amount of effort on every single cast. Now, as far as testing the reel goes, I wanted to test the same sized reel, but see if there was a difference in a lower versus a higher quality reel, at least price-wise. So on my control group, as you guys have seen, we're using the Shimano Vanford 2000. Now for our experiment group, we're going to be using the Daiwa Revros LT 1000. So they're both about the same size, so I thought this would be a really good comparison to see on that. Now for the rods, we're actually testing 2 different variables today. For rods, we're switching out from the Okuma Guide Select Pro, which is a 7.6 ultralight, to the Okuma Solilo, which is a 6-foot ultralight. So the Solilo's coming in at around $30-$40. The Guide Select Pro is about $140. So we have a very big price difference, as well as a rod that is a whole 1.5 feet taller. So I'm really curious to see if that's going to make a large difference in today's test. Now for the one I'm most excited about, which is testing out the lines. For the control group, we are going to stay using our line that we've used on the other 2, which is going to be the Berkeley Forward. This is a $30 braided line. This is the most expensive line that I could find at my local tackle shop. This is actually one of my new current favorite lines. I absolutely love it, and I feel like I get really long casts with it. Now we're going to be facing that off against the Suffix Pro Mix, which is coming in at around $5. This is a monofilament line, and this was the cheapest line I could find at the tackle shop. I not only wanted to test difference in prices for these lines, but I also wanted to test a braid versus a mono. I want to see if that makes a big difference here. All right, now that we have all of our data recorded, let's check it out and see what we can find. A few things really stood out to me the second I compiled all of this info. Firstly, I thought it was weird that the cheaper reel technically outcasted the expensive one, but then again, it wasn't by very much. So I'm assuming that there was some user error in there. In my opinion, it kind of proved my point that you don't buy a more expensive reel to cast further, but rather for the durability, the smoothness, drag, reduced fatigue, all of those extra features while on the water. Now, the rod change included a few key points to talk about. Firstly, with the mean. I was surprised that the average casting distance was only about 1 yard shorter than the control group, especially considering that there's a 1.5 foot length difference and like $100 price difference in those rods. One thing to note about the rod change, however, is that those numbers were all over the place. I mean, we can see in the range that this had the largest fluctuations in casting, in overall distance, literally double the control group. To me, this kind of shows how, much more consistent and accurate casting a longer rod can be, especially with lighter lures compared to a shorter rod. Of all the setups that casted that Berkley forward braid, the control group was the most consistent, and it shows. Now, the second I changed out that Berkley forward and put on the Suffix, I knew there was going to be a change in distance for this one. Now, this isn't to rip on Suffix by any means, because I still use tons of their different lines, and for the money, I think this line is phenomenal. However, that change in line is definitely seen in our numbers. You lose a lot of casting distance with that cheap mono, and even after the test, just for fun, I tried to really put my all into a cast, and the farthest I could get it out was 30 yards, which is only a little bit over the minimum for the control group with that Berkley forward. If I really wanted to try to launch that Berkley forward as hard as I could probably get that thing to 38, 40 yards. So there was a huge difference with the line. So I think we can come to a conclusion that the type of line you use, as well as the quality, can greatly affect your casting distances. Now, my test did technically show that it matters more than your rod and reel. However, I feel there's more testing to do on that front before we can come to a hard conclusion. In the future, I'd like to test a variety of different lengths, powers, and actions to see if we can, figure out more about the rod side of this test. Either way, I was super happy with how all this went, and I learned a ton regarding the physics behind the sport that we love so much. If you guys want to see a more in-depth video of the control group rod and reel setup I was using in today's video, I have that in the top left, along with another interesting video on the right side. Hope you guys got a kick out of today's video, and we'll see you guys next time.